Chapter 9 opens in a moment every shop owner recognizes immediately. The customer hasn't complained yet, but their body already has. They're standing instead of sitting. Their eyes keep drifting to the counter. They glance at their phone, then back up, like they're checking whether time is moving faster everywhere else. They were told the car would be pulled in. That time has passed. No one has updated them. Behind the counter, your new advisor is on the phone. You can tell they're trying to sound confident. Their shoulders are tight. Their voice is slightly higher than usual. They're clicking through screens too quickly, trying to keep up with a conversation they don't fully understand yet, and then you hear it, a pickup time, a confident answer, one you didn't approve. It assumes parts are in stock. It assumes the bay stays open. It assumes the job goes clean. None of those things are confirmed. At the same time, a technician steps out of a bay. You recognize the look immediately. It's not anger yet. It's the look that says, am I about to get blamed for something I didn't cause? They ask the question every tech asks when promises start drifting. Is this approved or not? Now you're standing in the middle of it. Customer waiting. Advisor promising. Technician pausing. And you feel the familiar pressure to fix it fast. Most leaders respond the same way in this moment. They step in. They take the phone. They smooth the promise. They reassure the customer. They give the tech direction. Everything stabilizes. The problem disappears. For now, what doesn't disappear is the pattern that just got reinforced. The advisor learns that confidence matters more than accuracy. The customer learns that promises shift. The technician learns that timing is unreliable. And the shop learns that things only work when you personally intervene. It feels responsible. It feels necessary. It also quietly locks the shop to you. Tomorrow looks the same. Another promise. Another correction. Another moment where training gets postponed because things are too busy. The shop runs at your standard only when you're present. When you leave, the standard leaves with you. This is the real cost of training beginners the wrong way. It isn't the beginner's mistake. It's the consequence that leaks out to the customer, the bay, and the schedule. Beginners don't know what a promise does yet. They haven't lived through comebacks. They haven't had a tech chew them out over rushed work. They haven't watched a loyal customer quietly stop trusting timelines. They're not careless. They're inexperienced. The failure happens when responsibility is handed off before competence exists, when authority sounds complete but understanding isn't. Customers feel that gap instantly, even if they never say a word. At this level, the danger isn't mistakes. It's uncontrolled consequence. Uncontrolled consequence burns labor. It creates rushed work. It trains customers to doubt. And over time, it makes the shop feel unstable, even when everyone is trying their best. Chapter 9 exists because elite shops don't avoid training. They avoid letting customers absorb the cost of it. The difference between a limited leader and a growing one shows up here. One grabs the work back. The other keeps control without shutting learning down. One fixes the moment. The other fixes the system. This chapter is about learning how to slow the moment without losing authority. How to let a beginner participate without letting them damage trust. How to stay accountable without becoming the bottleneck. If your shop still depends on you to keep promises accurate, this chapter is for that exact problem. Not in theory. In the middle of a waiting customer, a nervous advisor, and a technician asking for clarity. This is where training becomes expensive or becomes controlled. Beginners don't break shops. Uncontrolled promises do. Most shop owners blame training when things start slipping. They say the new advisor isn't ready, or doesn't get it yet, or needs more time. What's actually breaking the shop isn't the beginner's lack of experience. It's the moment they're allowed to speak with full authority before they understand consequence. A beginner promising freely feels productive on the surface. Phones are answered. Customers get confident responses. The counter looks calm. But underneath that calm is guesswork. Timing guesses, parts guesses, bay guesses. Those guesses don't stay contained at the counter. They travel. They travel to the bays as rushed work. They travel to the schedule as reshuffling. They travel to customers as disappointment. They travel back to you as cleanup. This is why shops feel fine until they don't. Nothing explodes immediately. Trust erodes quietly. Technicians stop believing timelines. Advisors stop checking. Customers start protecting themselves by calling, hovering, or leaving. Beginners don't intend this. They're trying to be helpful. They believe confidence is the job. They haven't learned yet that accuracy builds trust faster than reassurance. When a beginner promises freely, three things happen at once. First, the customer anchors to the promise. Once a time or outcome is spoken, it becomes real in their mind. Any change feels like a failure, even if the change is reasonable. Second, the technician inherits pressure they didn't create. They're now racing a clock that may not match reality. That pressure shows up as shortcuts, frustration, or refusal to proceed without clarity. Third, leadership gets pulled back into the role they're trying to exit. Every bad promise creates a decision you didn't plan to make today. This is why uncontrolled promises are so expensive. They multiply work instead of reducing it. The shop doesn't need beginners to be silent. It needs promises to be gated. There is a difference between letting someone speak and letting them commit the shop. Controlled shops decide in advance what a beginner can say with authority and what must be confirmed. They don't wait for a mistake to correct it. They prevent the mistake from reaching the customer in the first place. Customers don't mind new advisors. What they mind is uncertainty. When promises wobble, confidence disappears. When confidence disappears, trust follows. If promises stay accurate, customers stay calm, even when delays happen. If promises drift, even small delays feel personal. This is why the problem is not training speed. It's promise control. A shop that controls promises can train constantly without damage. A shop that doesn't will always feel like training is risky. The beginner didn't break the system. The system failed to contain the beginner. If beginners must learn what actually fails when they're allowed to promise freely, it's easy to say the answer is the customer. That's the most visible failure. The customer waits longer than expected. They get frustrated. They feel misled. But that's only the surface layer. What really fails first is predictability. When promises aren't controlled, no one knows what's real anymore. The schedule stops meaning anything. The bays stop trusting the front counter. Advisors stop knowing when to check. Leadership stops being proactive and starts reacting. The next thing that fails is technician trust. Technicians don't get angry because they're busy. They get angry when they're rushed for promises they didn't approve. When a beginner commits a timeline without understanding workload, the bay inherits pressure without consent. Over time, that creates resistance, not teamwork. Then accountability starts to blur. When a promise breaks, who owns it? The beginner didn't know better. The tech didn't agree to it. Leadership wasn't consulted. Everyone feels blamed, and no one feels responsible. That's how standards soften without anyone choosing to lower them. After that, customer confidence erodes. Customers can forgive delays. They struggle to forgive surprises. If expectations change late, they assume incompetence or dishonesty. Even loyal customers begin to guard themselves by calling more often, questioning recommendations, or hesitating to approve work. Finally, leadership capacity collapses. Every uncontrolled promise creates rework, re-explaining, rescheduling, recalming. Instead of building systems, leadership spends energy repairing moments. Growth stalls, not because people can't learn, but because consequences keep leaking. This is why the real failure isn't the beginner. The failure is letting learning create consequence. When beginners promise freely, the shop loses control of timing, trust, and energy. Not all at once. Quietly, gradually, predictably. So the real question isn't whether beginners should speak. It's whether promises should ever be uncontrolled. If the shop feels unstable when you step away, this is usually why. The moment beginners start learning in real situations, leadership has one job: stop consequence from escaping the learning process. That doesn't mean stopping training. It means controlling what training is allowed to affect. Beginners don't fail because they speak. They fail when their words are allowed to commit the shop before reality is confirmed. Time, pricing, authorization, and safety language are not neutral. Once spoken, they shape behavior downstream. That is why consequence control is the skill that separates struggling shops from stable ones. The first move is controlled access. A beginner does not own the full role. Certain actions stay locked until competence is proven. They can gather information. They can explain process. They can build rapport. But promises that bind the shop must pause until verified. This is not mistrust. It is protection. Next is visible accountability. Customers need to know who owns the outcome. When a senior advisor stays present and clear, "I'm still accountable," uncertainty disappears. The customer doesn't feel passed off. They feel supported. Training continues without eroding confidence. Then comes immediate interruption. The moment an unrealistic promise starts forming, it gets stopped in real time, not later. Not privately after the customer leaves. Early interruption prevents late apology. This protects dignity for everyone involved. The customer hears accuracy. The beginner learns the boundary. The shop avoids cleanup. Foreshadowing is the next layer. Leaders don't wait for delays to happen. They name uncertainty early. This may change once inspection starts. That single sentence removes surprise. Surprise is what damages trust, not delay. Checkpoints enforce discipline. Before estimates, before timelines, before closeout, beginners stop and confirm. This keeps learning inside guardrails. It also teaches judgment faster than trial and error ever could. Correction happens privately and specifically. Not vague warnings. Not emotional reactions. Clear standards. Clear miss. Clear replacement behavior. Public correction creates hiding. Hiding is where consequence leaks out. Under pressure, training narrows. It does not stop. Beginners do fewer things, not more. This is when leadership matters most. Chaos is not proof that training should pause. It's proof that control must tighten. When this system is used consistently, something shifts. Technicians stop inheriting chaos. Customers stop bracing for disappointment. Beginners learn faster because they're not cleaning up damage. Leadership stops being reactive. This is how standards move from a person to a process, not by speed, by containment. The shop stops orbiting you because your judgment is no longer trapped in your head. It lives in boundaries, checkpoints, and controlled promises that protect everyone involved. The goal of this chapter is not to slow training, it is to remove risk from it. When beginners are allowed to learn without customers paying the price, training becomes sustainable. The shop doesn't tense up when someone new answers the phone. Technicians don't brace for bad timelines. Customers don't feel the need to hover or double-check. Stability replaces anxiety. The first goal is simple: protect customers from learning mistakes. Mistakes are part of growth. Consequences don't have to be. When promises are gated and expectations are corrected early, customers experience honesty instead of disappointment. Trust stays intact even when things change. The second goal is to keep promises accurate while training continues. Accuracy doesn't come from confidence. It comes from verification. By controlling who can commit timelines, pricing, and authorization, the shop stays aligned. Training happens inside clear boundaries instead of spilling into cleanup. The third goal is to remove owner dependency. When standards only exist in your presence, growth stalls. When standards are enforced through structure, controlled access, visible accountability, interruption, foreshadowing, and checkpoints, the shop runs the same whether you're there or not. Nothing in this chapter requires being harsher. It requires being clearer. Elite shops don't eliminate mistakes. They eliminate uncontrolled consequence. They interrupt early. They correct privately. They protect customers without embarrassing beginners. They narrow training under pressure instead of abandoning it. When you apply this consistently, the result is predictable. Beginners gain confidence without guessing. Technicians trust the counter again. Customers feel steadiness instead of uncertainty. And leadership finally gets space to step back without fear. Training stops feeling expensive. Standards stop feeling fragile. And the shop stops orbiting one person.